Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting of June the 27th. I'll call the meeting to order. We're going to first do a special council meeting to update the development charges bylaw. So I'll call the special council meeting of June 27th to order. And the first thing we need to do is adopt the agenda. We have a recommendation here that the agenda for the June 27th, 2022 special meeting of council be accepted and passed. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest, and that's just with regard to this special meeting agenda. I have none to declare. Councillor McCabe?
I have none, Andy.
Okay. Councillor Hearn?
No, nothing.
Councillor Burke?
No.
And Councillor Yake?
No.
Okay, thank you. The notice and draft bylaw are attached to this agenda, and the recommendation that comes with that is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive for information the public notice and draft amending bylaw, and further that staff be directed to bring the bylaw to amend the development charges bylaw to a future meeting of council. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan, and open the floor for any questions or comments. So I guess I'm going to ask just if we could get a little background in terms of what's different with the map that was included versus what was in the previous version of the bylaw. Darren, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure, I can. So with the bylaw that's in place right now, there's a map for the downtown intensification corridor, and there's a map for the built boundary. At the moment, we only have the one map labeled as both. So this is to correct that and put the right map in the bylaw. So to date, we haven't had an application that's been affected by this. So now is a good time to get it fixed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. So now we're already to a confirming bylaw, but just for the special meeting. So we have a recommendation here that bylaw number 68-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its special meeting held on June 27th, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. If I could mover and seconder for that, please. Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to adjournment. A recommendation that the special council meeting of June 27th, 2022 be adjourned at 7:03 p.m. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned from our special meeting. Now we'll do the similar procedure to start things off again on our regular council meeting agenda. I'll call our regular council meeting to order, and we need to adopt the agenda for it. So we have a recommendation here that the agenda for the June 27th, 2022 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Could I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Dan, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. And we're back to disclosure of pecuniary interest, and this is with regard to the regular council meeting agenda. I have none to declare. Councillor Burke? Okay, Councillor Yake?
No.
Councillor Hearn?
I'm gonna declare a conflict around 5A.
Okay. And the nature of that conflict?
As my spouse is employed by one of the transportation options named in the report.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
None, Mayor Lennox.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we have our county council update. Do we have Councillor O'Neill with us? There he is.
There he is.
Ward 4 County Councillor, Councillor O'Neill, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox, and to the rest of council. We'll keep it very short tonight. I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you this evening. The county is receiving $8.7 million in 2022 for the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare System. That's better known as $10 a day childcare. 8.1 million is going to be directed to fee reduction, 378,000 to workforce compensation, and 249,000 to administer the program. This funding allocation is based on an assumption that 98% of the licensed childcare operators will participate in our area. The program's goal is to get an average of $10 per day childcare using licensed providers by September of 2025. And an average fee reduction of 50% for licensed childcare is expected by December 31st of this year, 2022. A large program coming through. The new cell for phase 2 landfill has been opened at Riverston. That was done last month. If you go to the landfill, maybe take a look at it. You'll probably never see the bottom of the landfill again. And July 1st, 2023, the Blue Box program begins to transition to producer responsibility province-wide. And it's a phased-in program, and Wellington County does not begin phasing it in until July 1st, 2025. So our program will not be affected until then. As of January 1st, 2026, county staff are expecting that the county will be out of the Blue Box program. It will be run by the it will be run throughout the province and the county, but the producers of the material that go in our blue boxes, they'll be running it, and accepted items will be standardized province-wide. That's probably a good thing, as people that move around the province don't know what goes in the blue box when they move to a new community, and usually call the township office asking the problem. RideWell is running with ride sharing now. Previously, due to COVID, you could not ride share, and we're facing the same problem as many other businesses. We don't have enough drivers. Booking rides at peak times is hindered by a lack of drivers. RideCo, the company that supports us there, they're currently recruiting additional drivers to remedy the issue. The industrial, commercial, and institutional green bin pilot project continues. 118 tons of material was diverted from landfill in the 5 months, November 1st, 21 to March 31st, 2022. And also 10,000 kilograms of edible food has been recovered. That was donated to food banks from different businesses, usually grocery stores. The program will eventually become user pay for the businesses. Currently, there is no charge to participate. And our township's next leaf and yard waste pickup is the week of Monday, July 25th. In October, we're going to have 2 collections, Monday, October 3rd and Monday, October 17th, those weeks for Wellington North. And in November, it'll also be 2 collections, Monday, November 14th and Monday, November 28th. Those collections in October and November that are extra, they just need to be done for timely pickup. Last year, getting through a week, the waste management just wasn't able to get through a week and get everybody that was scheduled that week done. So with the 2 collections, hopefully it'll be spread out a bit. Instead of picking up 20 bags somewhere, maybe it'll only be 12 and they'll get through a little quicker. Countywide, the program has been a huge success. 1,700 tons of leaf and yard waste was diverted from Riverston landfill in 2021. And that was about 10% of the material that was diverted in 2021 from the landfill. Also, Wellington County has approved land at Wellington Place in Aboyne for a 6-bed hospice. Dr. Simpson and Gower have been establishing community financial support. This is something that's not happening overnight. The hospice committee has to fundraise for building the hospice itself, and then they have to fundraise for having enough financial backing to run it for a couple of years. So that's a large amount of money they've got to raise, but I'm sure the community will come together and support that, because it's a welcome and needed thing for our communities, Wellington County wide, to have a hospice available to us instead of everybody having to go to the hospice at the south end of Guelph. Much needed. And that's about all I've got. Just want to wish everybody a safe and enjoyable summer. Started off by coming to Arthur this weekend for Arthur 150 celebrations, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Steve. Dan, go ahead.
Steve, can you just explain the blue box changes, how that's going to work?
Well, hopefully the province lets us know in the next little while how it's possibly going to work. We're probably lucky that we're not transitioning till 2025 compared to some of the communities are going to start in 2023. Hopefully the bugs are worked out by then. Basically, the producers are going to be responsible for picking it up. They're going to have to run the blue box program. It has to be the same as what they're doing, what we're doing now. Hopefully it'll be enhanced a little bit. But yeah, the staff don't have a whole lot of details yet. This was brought in, I think it started with the Liberals, so it's over 4 years ago. Probably 6 years ago, they started talking about it. And it's just about ready to get started next year, but a lot of details to come. But yeah, we don't expect, county staff does not expect that we will be responsible for picking the material up anymore. It will save the county a lot of money. But yeah, we're not going to be in the game.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next point, was, is there going to be a savings here on from the county's point of view? So I guess it sounds like we're gonna have to wait and see.
We'll see if that materializes. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Councillor McCabe, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to see you again, Councillor O'Neill. Guess the funding of the $8.5 million or whatever it is, will that actually expand daycare in Wellington County, or kind of keep it at the level that it's at? Like, will there be no newer daycare facilities open, or is it just to keep everything what we have now at a $10 a day amount?
Well, if new spaces open up and so a licensed provider does not have to join this if they don't want to, but they are expecting about 98% to join. So if somebody is doing it from their home and isn't licensed, they can't participate. So they expect that they're going to have to open more spaces, because the waiting list is going to be quite long when people say, well, I can't afford to take my child to my neighbor who I just as soon do, but at $10 a day somewhere else, they're probably going to move. But so yeah, the money's going to be large, as and this is for just this year.
Right.
So the federal government sends it through to the province, who sends it through to us, and we administer it.
Fair enough.
So hopefully
right.
They get a bunch more spaces for children.
Yeah, I hope so. Can I go ask another quick question, Mayor Lennox?
Sure, go ahead, Steve.
Excuse me. And just with your update on the blue bins and green bins and landfill, Councillor, is there, I guess we'll probably never ever get the wheeled bins then that Southgate uses. Like they're fairly large. We probably won't get those out in the rural areas. Would that be fair to say, or do you know?
I don't believe we will unless, something like this with the blue box, if they come out and if the producers come out and say, yeah, we want it all in a large bin like there is in the city of Guelph, for instance. Maybe at that time, the county would say, yeah, well, if they're gonna have a truck that comes around collecting like that, with the arms on it, maybe at that point, they'd look at it, but right now, I'd say no.
Okay. All right, thanks. No, I just always get that question.
Other questions for Steve? Lisa, go ahead.
Well, my question was kind of like how Councillor McCabe had asked about the childcare and whether there were enough providers within the county. Likely there are not. Cheap childcare is great. I know when Wyatt was little, even then it was $40 a day and I couldn't find anyone, right? But I did want to give a shout out to the county. When I did start looking into this, for anyone who's looking at childcare, your childcare map on the website is great. So you just click it and it hopefully finds childcare near you. So I just wanted to give you a shout out about that at least.
It will be a
Really
large
nice.
project for staff to administer. There's no doubt about that. Because they literally have to approve a licensed facility, and if they don't approve it, then the licensed facility can appeal. It's going to be a lot of work for staff, but it'll get going.
Other questions for Steve? So I'll just add a little bit of information from Steve's answer, because I sit on the AMO Waste Management Task Force. I get a little bit more information than we get locally around some of what's happening with the blue box transition. And right now, the producers don't even know how they're going to do this yet. Because if you think about all the municipalities across the province, some of them have their own equipment, like Wellington County contracts out both garbage collection and blue box collection to Waste Management. So we don't own any equipment. We don't have any physical, like building facilities, like the sorting that Waste Management does in Mount Forest of those recyclable materials. But other municipalities like the City of Toronto or York Region or places like that, they do have all of that. And so that's the infrastructure that's out there to handle this material, but the municipalities own it. But the producers organizations are going to have to figure out how to make this work. Like how are they going to handle those recyclable materials? Who's going to process them? It's a huge undertaking, and so it's something that's coming soon to start the transition. And they're going to work with some of those larger municipalities, particularly the City of Toronto and around the City of Toronto, because I think if the producer organizations believe that if they can manage those, then taking on somebody like Wellington County will be relatively straightforward. So each municipality is going to have to negotiate with the producer organizations as to what they're going to do, whether they're going to buy the municipality's equipment and facilities, or hire the municipality to operate those facilities, or do something completely on their own. Some municipalities may be left holding assets that they don't need anymore. So from Wellington County's perspective, again, because we contracted out, it's relatively straightforward for us. And the producer organizations may simply continue the contracts with somebody like Waste Management who can deliver the service and not require them to make an investment in infrastructure and equipment. So we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but I would suspect that it would be very attractive to have a contract with somebody like Waste Management to do the work for them. And if that continues, they simply kind of take over the contract that the county currently has with Waste Management. I think for most residents, it will be extremely seamless. So we're not making the transition until 2025, and we'll see how it goes with the initial bunch. But I'm hopeful that that's the way it will end up, and we will end up simply allowing the producer organizations to take over that contract. And they would make the most seamless transition for our residents, I think. So there's a lot more to be figured out on this, but stay tuned. There's more to come.
For sure.
Any other questions or comments? Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to go back to the blue box, so it's anticipated that what's collected won't change, but we're hoping that there will be enhancements to it. Is that a fair statement?
So there may be some slight refinements from what's collected now. I don't know what that looks like yet in terms of, but the core things that we're recycling now, like the containers, the paper, that will continue. The producer organizations have a list of materials that they must collect province-wide, and as Councillor O'Neill said, it will be standardized. So some places, for instance, collect like the coffee pods as an example. That may not happen in the new thing, but I think for the most of the materials that we have collected here in Wellington County, it will be covered. I think that the province is likely, there's pressure on the provincial government to get new things into the blue box stream, the recycling stream, but I think there's a feeling that are a little overwhelmed right now with this transition, and to add more things to them in the short term is probably not going to happen. I suspect that we want the move to greater number of things to be diverted from landfill will be coming after the transition is complete, just to allow them time to adapt. But certainly that's one of the priorities that the task force that I'm on is dedicated to, is to increase the number of things that can be recycled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Steve, for sharing. You said you were going to be brief, but you covered a lot of ground.
Well, lots going on.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Okay.
See you Friday.
Steve.
Bye.
Okay, so we'll have a recess to move into a public meeting to deal with the planning matter. Is the next thing on our agenda. And the recommendation reads as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the June 27th, 2022 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for Christian F. Martin. This is a zoning bylaw amendment. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're recessed from our council meeting. And we'll switch over to the public meeting. And I will call the public meeting to order at 7:23 and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest in regard to this application, ZBA 10/22 for Christian F. Martin. Councillor Yake.
No.
Councillor McCabe.
I have none, Mayor.
Councillor Burke.
No.
Councillor Hearn.
No.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything to declare either. So we'll move on to the application here, the location of the subject land. So the land subject to the proposed amendment is described as part lot 16, concession 14, and concession 13, part lot 16 and 17, and is municipally known as 9583 Side Road 15. The property is approximately 104.95 hectares in size, and the location is shown on the map in your package. The purpose and effect of the proposed amendment is to amend the existing site-specific agricultural A104 zone. This application is seeking to rezone the subject lands to permit a 10,000 square foot of outdoor storage for an existing on-farm diversified use. Additional relief may be considered at this meeting. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and as well to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on May 17th, 2022.
Great, thank you. Matthew, I see you're on the screen. So can you just run us through this one, please?
For sure. Good evening, council and members of the public. So through you, Chair, before you today is a zoning bylaw amendment seeking to amend the existing agricultural site-specific A-104 zone. Council may be familiar with the subject lands. So in April of 2021, last year, a zone amendment was approved to permit an on-farm diversified use, specifically a metal workshop on the farm. The applicant is before council today seeking to amend the verbiage of the existing site-specific zone to permit a 10,000 square foot outdoor storage area for the on-farm diversified use, which is prohibited under the home industry provisions of the zoning bylaw. Planning staff note that the proposed outdoor storage is located behind the existing home industry and will be visually screened from side road 15, with the surrounding land uses are as primarily agricultural. So with that said, planning staff are generally supportive of the application, have no concerns, and as it conforms to the zoning bylaw, the official plan and provincial policy. And I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Matthew. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
There's been no correspondence received.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wishing notice of the decision, the bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following the public meeting. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that said, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public.
So Mr. Martin,
anyone?
Sorry, Mr. Martin is
Go
on.
ahead.
Mr. Martin is on the phone. And Mr. Martin, if you would like to make comments, just as a reminder, you just have to press *6 and that will enable you to be able to speak at the meeting on your phone.
Do we have anyone registered to speak on this application, Karen, besides Mr. Martin?
No.
Can you hear?
Yep, I can hear it. Well,
Sorry, there you go.
Can you hear me now, Karen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
welcome.
I have no comments, I guess.
Okay.
I can try answer questions. I'm just doing a favor for my neighbor. I did the application for him as an agent for Christian. So.
Okay. All right, we'll just stay tuned. We'll see if council has any questions for you. So if we have no one else registered to speak on this application, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from council. Anybody? Steve, go ahead.
Thanks. It looks like Matt's hand is up as well, but I don't know if that's on purpose or. I guess my one question is if this is an agricultural metal shop, is that right? You're just trying to expand the outdoor storage for the metal shop.
That is correct. There's an opportunity that Christian had where he would need outdoor storage to store steel. And if you're referring to agricultural, are you thinking farm related work or?
I guess my question would be what do you make at the metal shop? I guess that kind of would lend itself to ag.
As far as that goes, there is maybe not too much. What the reason we're asking for the outdoor storage is for making train car parts and buildings. So buildings, I guess, would be related to ag. there's a friend of ours in Broughton Station that started building steel buildings, like the pre-engineered steel buildings. So Christian's son would like to help with that, and also with some train car parts. What they want to do is get a plasma cutter and a press brake to form steel, and then they need some outdoor storage in order to store the steel, because the sheets are 20 feet long. And of course, too big to store inside. And we rather have permission to store stuff outside than do it without permission. That's the whole idea behind it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dan, go ahead.
So the storage will be for steel and prefabricated buildings? Is that kind of what I'm hearing? In various stages of construction?
That's right, yes. It would be for the raw material and the finished fabricated parts, yes.
And then when these buildings are built, then they're sold and taken to customers.
Yes, and he would only be a subcontractor to Broughton Welding in Broughton Station.
Subcontractor, okay,
That's what he's planning, as doing it as a subcontractor for.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I guess if there's nothing further on this, we'll adjourn the public meeting and then deal with the zoning bylaw amendment in our regular council meeting. So I have a recommendation here that the public meeting of June 27th, 2022 be adjourned at 7:32 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. So we're adjourned from our public meeting. We'll switch back to a council meeting. So we'll resume the regular meeting of council, and recommendation to do that is as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the June 27th, 2022 regular meeting of council at 7:33 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're back in our regular council meeting. So the first item up is the zoning bylaw amendment for the public meeting application we just heard. And the recommendation is that bylaw number 75-22 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 66-01 being a zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. This is for part lot 16, concession 14, and concession 13, part lots 16 and 17 for Christian F. Martin. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Moved by Dan, seconded by Sherry. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move to adoption of the minutes of council meeting. So recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on June 6th, 2022 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Steve. Any questions or comments on those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. On to business arising from a previous meeting of council. We have, of course, the recurring theme, the Mount Forest pool replacement, CAO report. And before we launch into that, I thought it might be good to just do a quick recap of some of the progress we've made over the last couple of meetings on this this project. We reached out to our neighboring municipalities to the north with a letter, and where they responded by inviting us to council meetings in early August to present the pool concept and information to those councils in Southgate and West Gray. We did have some discussions around contributions from neighboring municipalities. We had some discussion about things like naming rights, the potential land sale of the old pool, and development charges. All of those things going to the capital cost of the pool, along with the planned enhancements being the responsibility of the fundraising committee. Yeah, that's just, I probably forgot a couple things, but I just thought I'd recap the progress we made to date. And I think we're at a point now where we're probably going to need to be a bit creative to figure out how we're going to get a pool as quickly as we can in Mount Forest. So I guess I'm just going to suggest maybe we do some sort of a brainstorming session here today to try to figure out how we can move the yardsticks on this project forward. So we'll throw it out to you, members of council, to get us rolling here. Sherry, go ahead.
So yeah, so to start that discussion, I had sort of chosen item number 6 off that list, which was to make the Mount Forest pool the #1 priority project for recreation, at least within Mount Forest in the coming years. And I think that's sort of elevated, as we know, because the Roy Grant pool unfortunately had to close this summer and probably will be closed next summer as well. So I just think that it's important that we have that discussion and endorse the fact that it is the #1 priority. Our ballparks and ballparks and parks in general and other playing fields seem to be in pretty good shape here. So I think that's important to give direction to staff and then have those conversations as to how we go about funding the project through different modeling, whether it's grants, donations, fundraising, funds from our neighbors, debentures. We've talked all about that, but I just think that maybe that could be a part of that conversation as well, Mayor Lennox.
Okay. Yeah, I think certainly all of us would support tapping into grant funding if there were opportunities. I'm not aware of any at the current moment, but certainly we certainly want it to be on our radar for any opportunities that come up. I'll throw that to other members of council for their comments as well. Steve, go ahead, and then Dan.
I would agree. We'd have to search out every possible grant avenue that we can for this, and obviously hope the meetings with West Gray and Southgate go well as well. And yeah, we've really got to figure out how we're going to pay for it. I'm open to a lot of different suggestions, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to go to Dan first, Sherry, and then back to you.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly supportive of making it the #1 priority. I mean, it's been talked about it for many years, and it's time to get this project moving forward, and hopefully with the assistance of some partners, then it will. We made an application, I guess, to the Canada Infrastructure Plan for the Arthur Community Center, and we were turned down and obviously disappointed at that outcome. But are those only one-time applications, or can they be made again for other projects? And I guess, who do we have? Do we have anybody that is looking into possible grants that might be available? Like, do we have anybody within our ranks in the municipality that is pursuing those opportunities?
Okay, I see Matt's got his hand up, so we'll let him take a crack at it.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Yates. As it relates to the ICIP grant application for the Arthur and Area Community Center, we're still awaiting hearing back from our most recent. So the last two iterations of grant applications related to recreation, we've put forward projects related to the Arthur and Area Community Center. Staff is going to be coming very shortly with a report that says dealing with the roof at the Arthur and Area Community Center is becoming more of a priority. And as far as staff keeping their ear to the ground, I know many members of staff are tied into organizations like AMO, AMCTO, and the province itself as it relates to when grant applications become available. So I would say within our organization, it doesn't come to necessarily one person, but we have a pretty good feelers out as it relates to grant applications when they become available.
And just to clarify, I think part of what Councillor Yake was asking is the I think you call it the ICIP stream of funds. They just announced intake opportunities. It's not an ongoing thing that we can keep reapplying for periodically. Is that I have that correct, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're kind of like cohorts, or they're by invitation. Yes, yeah. And there isn't one that we're aware of that's coming due. There's one we're working through right now.
Okay. Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, so my question is along the same vein. So I think by making it one of the priorities in recreation, do we or are we at a point that this project is ready to submit if there were grant applications, today, next week, next month that we could apply for? That's my concern. Is I want to make sure that, once those opportunities may become available, that this project is ready for those applications.
Okay.
You mean shovel ready?
Well,
Mary?
we quite often see that, there were points in the application that were not adequate to what they were looking for, or the submission wasn't maybe necessarily complete. So if we're looking at that as grants, as a possible and sounds like a huge portion of the revenue stream, we need to make sure that the project's ready for that application. And I guess that's why I'm suggesting that, not saying that the Arthur Community Center isn't important, because we have been working on that for a long time. And that's why my opening statement was that the pool should be the #1 priority in Mount Forest, not taking away from the works that staff have been doing to get that work done in Arthur. But I want to make sure that this project is ready if and when those grants or funds become available. And I'm not, in my opinion, I don't know if we are.
Matt, do you want to comment on that?
Yep, I can, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Burke. So for the Arthur and Area Community Center, we don't have detailed designs done either. For the Mount Forest Pool, we don't have detailed designs done. I think it would be easy for us as a corporation to demonstrate that the Mount Forest Outdoor Pool and Aquatic Center Council has invested significant money on, get us there. What we have seen is that grant applications, as it relates to rec recently, have a leaning towards rehabilitation, which a new facility is different, but every grant application is very unique. And I think we're working down a path as it relates to the Mount Forest Outdoor Pool and Aquatic Center that we're going to have a detailed design done soon. So could we turn shovel tomorrow? No. Do we kind of know where we're heading? Yeah. And is it easy to demonstrate that that's been deemed an important project by council? I think yes. It kind of just depends on the specifics of the grant application and how it's released and what kind of the check boxes they're looking to accomplish. We don't have a detailed design done yet, but we're working towards that.
Okay, thank you. As long as we feel that that's good enough. And I think, Matt, you've answered that question. So thank you for that.
Dan, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask if we're meeting with West Gray and Southgate in August. Is that what I heard? Are we at the point where you go and make that presentation and you throw out what kind of number we're looking at from them? Like, are we prepared to throw out the ask, I guess, at that same meeting?
So I guess I'll try to tackle that a little bit. I think my perception, and I am open to changing direction on this if that's necessary, but my direction was to open the conversation and say, we're working on this. We'd sure appreciate your support. We're working on finalizing the design. And because of the election, I think it may be premature to come forward with an ask, like with a hard number ask, until we allow the new councils to weigh in on it. But we're wanting to make sure that they're aware of it, they're on their radar, and that we will be coming back with an ask. It's my approach, but if the rest of council wants to take a different approach, I am perfectly open to that.
Sorry, Steve, it could be a question that may come up at the meeting, right? And I guess if it was explained maybe in that way, or those terms, that that would be okay. But maybe we need to get to that point too, where we need to have that discussion as to what we're going to ask for.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we're again, I'm relying on all of you guys to help me with this, but are we at the point where we can nail down what we want to ask for?
If I can chime in, thanks. I think I thought the meeting arrives under the assumption of that the meeting would just be to help inform them and let them know what we are up to, and that we have some plans in the works. And I don't know if, and Karen, maybe you can answer this. I don't know if we could make a definite ask with a certain amount of money and tie the hands of a council that might not be there next year or next term.
Depends if they're on lame duck. They can't really commit to something that's not in a budget. And you are at risk if anything an outgoing council decides on. I mean, it'll probably be a larger than normal ask, and it's not included in a budget. And so it could go either way anyway.
Yeah, and I guess my other thinking was, say we had a number and say council, Southgate or West Gray said, yeah, we'll give you X amount of dollars. And none of them get back in, and maybe none of us get back in. Would that, like, we start at square one again?
Yes.
I mean, anything could happen. I think we have to proceed as if we're on the path we need to be on, and and that they're on the path that they need to be on. But I think to Karen's point, we do need to be respectful that if they're going to make a significant ask, they're going to need the budget for it. And we got to allow them time to do that.
Yep, I agree. I think, yeah, I mean, like you said, respect of asking for hopefully not small chump change, but they would have, yeah, they'd have to put it in their budget for sure. I don't think they can just go off without public not public consultation, but without at least putting it in their budget.
Right. And both of the meetings, I'd have to go to my calendar to look up the exact dates, but they're in early August. I think it's the 3rd and the 9th. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, you brought up the issue. Do you think we should be having a hard ask at this point?
I don't know if, and I agree with the way the conversation's gone, that maybe it might be too early, but in our own minds, should we try to put together a number?
Probably is a good idea, but I think I think there's a lot of questions, at least maybe it's just me. There's a lot of questions in my mind, and I'll just speak for myself on this case, about how we're going to fund this, where we've talked about a number of options. But I think, unless we're going to just simply debenture it and go, we've got a shortfall to make up, or figure out how we're going to make a shortfall up. And, there's a number of options that we can be looking at. One, are we going to look for ways to build the project for like, to me, $5.5 million is a lot of money. Are we going to put a limit on the project's scale and scope? Does that mean we have to revisit kind of the design a little bit and trim some corners? Are we going to try to fundraise more in the community? Are we going to ask the community contribution to be different? And then what does that look like? I think we got to nail some of this stuff down, at least in terms of being clear about where we're going, before we go to them and say, I think we need to be able to say, this is what we're doing. We'd appreciate your help and I think it's absolutely important to have an ask. This is what we'd like to have from you, because your residents are going to use this facility as well, and we believe it's an asset to your residents as well as our own. Like in the report, it talks about a $2.5 million debenture. Well, we can put the DCs and potential land sale of the existing location towards that, and we're still going to be a long way from $5.5 million. So how are we going to close that gap? And I think we got to start talking about what we think the process is. I mean, we've talked about naming rights, and we think that should go to the capital contribution. But one of the concerns I have around naming rights is who's going to go out and solicit that? Are we as council and staff going to solicit that? Or are we going to involve the fundraising committee in that? I'm thinking it's going to be confusing as heck for potential contributors if there's two different groups asking for funds in different ways. And I know that I have no desire to change the game for the fundraising committee, because they've had an understanding going forward. But, do we need to go to them and ask, is there capacity to do more? Are you interested in doing more if we offer things like naming rights to the committee to fundraise? And Sherry, I'm going to maybe put you on the spot a little bit. Do you think there's an appetite to have that conversation with the group at all?
Well, I would think that, as we're out talking to folks, because we do have, we have some ideas and we're gonna rely on some of the ideas and approaches that we had for the splash pad. And we did go out and we did talk to corporations. I mean, we got $10,000 donations for different things. Some were for benches and stones, and some were just straight donations. I mean, if we're out talking to somebody and they want to know how they get their name on the facility, I mean, that's not a discussion we're going to probably going to shy away from and say, oh, no, that's not our department. I mean, we want to have conversations with everybody and how they can contribute, from the very small who empty their piggy banks into donation jars to the very large. So I don't think that that's out of the realm of the committee to do that. But again, those guidelines, we would still have to have those conversations at this table. Like if somebody came up and said, we're going to give you $50,000, is that the largest donation we're going to get? I mean, I think you have to kind of wait and see what, $50,000 might not be the largest donation. Somebody may come with more. So how do we determine who gets the naming rights?
Yeah, and I guess I was thinking, I look at the fundraising committee, and there's lots of years of experience of raising funds there. Certainly more experience at it than I have. And I'm wondering is there a way that we can engage that expertise to help us on a grander scale than what we've been talking about with just the enhancements? I mean, if the committee is not interested in doing that, that's fine. I understand, we don't want to change what we started into this process with, but if there's an appetite to be helpful along that area, I think there's expertise there that would be really valuable to us.
I would say that I believe that there probably is, but I never like to put words in anybody's mouth except my own. So I think that would be something that we could have some discussion about at a future meeting. We're looking at trying to get together here the first part of July. But I think that those conversations, whether that's a responsibility of the committee or not, those conversations are going to happen when we are talking to other donors, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm just worried about the confusion if depending on how it plays out. We don't want people to be confused about the process. So the donors in particular, I mean, is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I agree.
Steve, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor. I like the word that Councillor Burke that you used, guidelines. And I think for naming rights or for bigger parts of the puzzle for a pool, I think there could or should maybe be guidelines set up of X amount will get you this. And I don't, does it go to the highest bidder for the naming rights? Like, is it almost like not an auction, but I think everyone should be, all the possible companies that could contribute in large number should be asked. And I absolutely would love to tap into the fundraising skills that are already at play with the ad hoc committee, and then and help be a part of that as well, and go to some of our larger corporations and see how much help we can get from them.
Well, and should we be considering, smaller scale naming too, and I mean, this is just me being a bit facetious, but is it the Councillor Burke women's change room,
Yeah.
And should we be considering those types of things as well? And I'm not trying to single you out, Sherry. I just was trying to have a little fun.
No worries.
Yeah, I think there should be all levels of contribution, because there'll be all levels of abilities of companies and of individuals in and around our township that will be willing to help for sure.
So maybe we need to do some research on what other communities have done around naming of facilities to kind of get a handle on it. I know that I was talking to a person who was, naming a recreation facility, but it was, I think, a $5 million contribution. I don't think that's what we're looking at here, but something that matches the scale of the project and respects the importance of it. But I think, we need to think about how long does that naming rights last too? Is it indefinitely for the life of the project? Is it 20 years? Is it 10 years? What is it? I mean, we got to think about some of those things as well.
Well, and I think if we're if we could do that, it would be nice to say if it was X dollars for the Dan Yake pool, some of that money would be set aside so that there would be, I guess we could still, still pull on that funding for upgrades or just for maintenance as well. Like just not the naming rights, but also to try and keep the money down to for the maintenance of the pool as well. So not only for the naming rights, but to keep the pool in good shape. And I could see that being a 5 or 10 year plan as well.
So Sherry, you raised a point that I'd like to dig a little deeper on if I could, because I think you were onto something, but I'm just not sure what the right way to go about this is. You talked about, deciding how much some of these things are, and then that helps us decide what the fundraising goal is. And I think that's great. Do you have suggestions on where we start with that and how we can start knocking some of it off?
Well, I know that, we've talked about the sunshades as an example, and that was part of the reason why the committee wanted to have a design and had continuously pushed for a design, because we felt that just sort of like the splash pad, like there's not going to be the opportunity to sell benches or armor stones, but sunshades could be sold for X number of dollars, and those could be attainable for a lot of people. Not a lot of people, but it could be the Lennox family shade, or the Lions Club or the Legion may come in and buy all of those shades if they could put their logo on it. We talked about doing another pathway. I've had lots of people ask about the pathway into the pool. They really like the brick idea. If the desk, like however the setup is in the front lobby, the desk could be, parted out to, if it's a $10,000 desk or a $20,000 desk. Sometimes people like to put their name on things that people are going to walk past and see their name every time they're in that facility, is sort of some of the discussions that our committee has had. As for the naming rights of the whole building, we all know that the Lions Club would still like it to be named after a Lions Club member. But those discussions still, again, need to be had, because there may be somebody that comes in and they understand that somebody may come in and donate a large contribution. Councillor McCabe threw out $5 million. Maybe somebody in the community has that kind of money sitting around that they'd like to donate, and that'd be fabulous. And that would make our lives all a lot easier. But
Wow.
yeah, you never know. It's not us. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not us. But I think that those are some of the conversations that we're starting to will continue to have at our committee meetings, because we've got the You've Been Flocked, that's been done. We're looking at bringing that back. We've got a couple of other fundraiser things on the go, but we're always looking for other ideas and other ways. And once I think we've sort of got a better idea of what the design's going to look like, we know that the sunshades are important. we can bring some of that information back once we have a brainstorming session more at the committee level for council and some ideas.
Dan?
Sherry, would it be, I mean, we've heard the discussion about approaching businesses and that type of thing. Would it be, again, and it, you know, I guess the timing of all of this is always the critical issue, but like, would it be worth sending letters and to businesses to make them aware of what's going on? If they're not aware, then they certainly haven't been paying too much attention to anything, but, you know, to make them aware, and that, you know, would they consider, you know, making donations? I mean, I don't know how many businesses there are in this particular area, but there certainly would be a number of them, and those letters would give you an indication, some sort of an indication as to maybe what kind of response you're going to get. Some businesses might say no, some might say, yeah, we're waiting for you to show up here and ask. So, or again, you know, I don't know if the timing's right, but the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take overall. So
Right.
at some point, we got to pull the Band-Aid off here and move forward.
So to Dan's point, we found when we were doing the splash pad, it wasn't until we had the brochure and we could really talk about the design itself and what it was going to entail, because everybody wants to know what it's going to look like. Even the girls at the farmers market on Saturday fielded all kinds of questions about what the design was going to look like, when it was going to open. That's what people want to see. So when we get to that stage, when we have something that we can say, you know, it's going to be X, then I think that's when you launch those kinds of fundraising initiatives, because people want to see what they're donating towards, not just a concept or an idea.
Karen, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, I've just done a quick Google search through AMCTO, and there are a number of examples of naming right policies for corporate assets. And I just think if you're going to go out and you're looking at big donations, you know, when you go to corporate sponsorships, you might be better to have a policy to say who's going to get, how you're going to, like, let's say, you know, we would be so lucky as 2 companies want to each donate $1 million, but each of them want the naming rights. So just the one policy I looked at quick, there was a committee and a decision matrix, and, you know, however many points you hit. And I mean, if you don't get that established before you go out and ask, you may run into that problem. And then, you know, you can put the values on whether it is a change room, whether it's the building, whether it's that, and then have your criteria, and then you put it out there. Just the one I looked at real quick, then the municipality issued it by way of letter or brochure to all the corporations, and they all know how it's going to be judged. It's not just the first one with a $10,000 check, because Sherry's right, the next person might come in with a $50,000 check. So it just seems to be a more fair way, so people aren't, well, I didn't know that, or I would have offered more, right?
I think that's what I was kind of alluding to, is kind of having guidelines set up, like X amount gets you this, X amount gets you more or less, whatever, depending on that donation is. And yeah, if we ran into that would be an amazing problem to have 2 people or 2 companies offering $1 million. Yeah, I think we'd have to obviously figure that out. And then, like Councillor Burke said, then there's the part with the Lions Club. They might want it under another member's name as well. Might be a little tougher for them to match a donation from Darren Jones than all the Lions, though, as well. So
if you have this document in advance, it helps alleviate hard feelings that, well, I offered this money first and why didn't I get the naming rights? And because here's our policy and you can go to your corporate donors with that policy.
Yeah, it's got to be transparent for sure.
So maybe we could ask staff to research some different policies and come back with a proposal, or at least some suggestions on a policy that we can move forward. And I think maybe if you're okay with that, Councillor Burke, with the fundraising committee, you know, ask them what kind of things do they think naming rights would be fundraisable for. You know, let's get a list of things out on the table so that, to Councillor McCabe's point, we can set the parameters once we have a policy in place.
I don't disagree with that. I think that it should also, that recommendation should maybe also go to the committee so that they can have a look at it as well, so that they know what they're dealing with. If this is going to be an additional ask, if that's what they decide that they want to do.
Yeah, I don't see any challenge with that. They have to discuss that with them. I think it's up to us to set the policy and parameters, but certainly, yeah, if they want to, if they're willing to and think there's more potential out there through some of these things, then we certainly want to involve them in that process from my perspective anyway.
Okay.
Any other thoughts and ideas for today?
So are you providing direction to staff to bring back a policy or to bring back examples?
Well, to come up with a policy, we're going to need some examples, or staff's going to need some examples of different things. Yeah, let's start with some examples, and if there's a recommended policy out of that, that would be even better, but let's start with some examples.
Okay.
I think like the document that you just found online would be pretty helpful. I thought we did get some notes or some suggestions from other townships already. Maybe I'm imagining that, but I don't mind asking some councillors that I know in the area that have municipal assets that have been fundraised for, see if they have policies.
Yeah, the closest one I know of is the new arena in Listowel.
Yeah.
North Perth did the naming on it. That's the closest one I know of.
And I don't mind reaching out to North Perth at all. I know a few of the councillors on that council as well.
Any other thoughts on how we can move toward closing the financing gap? Because I think that's our biggest stumbling block. Are we let's go back a step. Are we interested in talking about looking at modifying the project a little bit to see if there's an opportunity to save some money there? Or are we sold that this is the direction we need to go based on the designs we have?
I'd like to see if there's some ways to save money, but I don't know how that's going to be possible with a kind of a concept that we kind of like already. Yeah, that's a great question.
Matt?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Like staff are looking at kind of a pared down concept based on concept number 3. We're working with the architect towards hopefully bringing it to RPL next week, but also staff are working on that, and like a pared down design just to see if we can get the cost down. Oh, and the other thing is the architect is hopefully coming to the next meeting, which is the July 11th meeting. Because based on the last meeting, council's direction was to see if we can get the architect to come and have a conversation with council as it relates to maybe design features that might result in a lower cost design. So those are two things on a staff level we're pursuing that hopefully is in line with what members of council are wanting.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. When did you say your next fundraising committee meeting is, Sherry?
We're working on something in the first part of July.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion for today? Okay. Well, I guess there's nothing further. We've given direction to staff to look at a naming policy. We're going to do some, just trying to recap, make sure I've got everything captured in my own mind. We're going to talk with the fundraising committee and look for suggestions there. And we're going to proceed with meeting with West Gray and Southgate in early August and be doing basically an introduction to the project at this point and let them know that we will be coming back with an ask, just not necessarily having a hard number at this point.
I'm all right with that.
Okay. Okay. So let's move on to our items for consideration this evening and pull out those things we'd like to have some further discussion on.
Sorry.
Don't everybody speak at once. Steve?
I wouldn't mind 1A, the Arthur 150 committee minutes.
Okay, 1A. I think we're going to need to pull, I think it's 5A, the transportation options for the pool. Darren?
Curtis has prepared a slide deck for the cannabis bylaw. That is 2H, and that's related to our interim control bylaw that expires this fall.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that's all I had, Mayor Lennox.
Okay. Anybody have any others? Nobody has any others?
Sorry, I have one
Okay.
more, just 6A, sorry, just the compliance audit committee. Sorry, I was just trying to scroll down to find the number and letter.
6A, okay. So that's 1A, 5A, 6A, and 2H. Last call. Any others? I'm shuffling a lot of paper today. These are some long recommendations on this one. Okay, if there's nobody speaking up for any others, I have a recommendation here that all items listed under items for consideration on the June 27th, 2022 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to 1A here, and the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Arthur 150 Committee meeting held on June 6th, 2022. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. And we'll open the floor for questions or comments. Steve, I think you had something there.
Yeah, thanks. And I was just kind of bringing this out to light just because everyone knows it's the 150th on July, and I wanted to give a shout to the committee that has done a lot of the planning over the last while to make sure that this is going to be a busy and great party, I would say, for the town of Arthur, and obviously for Canada Day as well. Are we scheduled to be in the parade? That's one question I did have. And we all set up, ready for that? I couldn't remember if we had, so that's good. Yeah, and it looks like the weather is going to be with us as well.
So just in regard to the parade, Steve, just for clarification, we will be on a horse-drawn vehicle. And we need to convene behind the Farmers Plus. That's where the horse-drawn vehicles will be prior to the parade.
Okay.
Also, if any of you can attend the opening ceremonies, there will be some speeches by dignitaries and then a ribbon cutting, and your help would be appreciated with the ribbon cutting efforts as well. So if you're able to be there, that would be great. And then on the Saturday, there's the unveiling of the plaque donated by from Fergus with just on the front of the Cozenet Center, commemorating the 150th year as well. And of course, let's not forget the Brent Barnes Memorial Skate Park opening as well. It's going to be a busy weekend.
It sure is.
Sorry,
Other
you
questions?
can't see that. That's a skateboard. We got some.
Are you planning to use it that day, Lisa?
Something will happen with it.
Good.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. I'll call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Well, that 2H, I believe, is the next one. And this is in regard to the cannabis. So there's two recommendations here. I'll read those recommendations, and then I think Curtis has a presentation. So let's start with the first recommendation, at least. The Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North received planning report prepared by Curtis Marshall, Manager of Development Planning, County of Wellington, dated June 15th, 2022, regarding cannabis production and processing, land use study, regulatory options report. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. That's great. Curtis, I know you've been spending a fair bit of time on this, so we want to hear what you have to share with us on this burning topic, maybe is the right word.
Yes, thank you. I almost made it under the radar, but Darren pointed me out, so I'm here to do my presentation. So I'm going to try and good evening, Mayor Lennox and Council. I've got a brief presentation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share my screen, and hopefully this works right. And is it up on the screen now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So hopefully it keeps up here with my internet connection. So as you mentioned, I'm back here to report on our cannabis review study here on behalf of the township. So the purpose of my presentation tonight is to present regulatory options to regulate cannabis production and processing uses in the township. Planning staff have prepared a regulatory options report for council's consideration that's on the agenda here tonight. And moving forward, the endorsed directions from the report will serve to inform the preparation of a draft zoning bylaw amendment for the township. So as council may recall, an interim control bylaw was passed last September, which prohibited the use of land, buildings, and structures for cannabis production related uses for a one-year period throughout the township. So this interim control bylaw was passed in order to assist with a cannabis study, which is a review of cannabis land uses in the township as a land use. So right now we are in phase 2 of our study and of our review. If Councilor will remember, back in April, I was before you with a background report that reviewed applicable policies, best practices, and just a general review of the growing and processing of cannabis. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm here tonight to review some regulatory options that planning staff have prepared, and we've also provided some recommended, or I'd say preferred options for you to consider. So the first, so I should also add these options we've prepared and that I'll be reviewing with you tonight. They've been based on the background work that was completed and also have been developed in consultation with township staff. So the idea is we've presented these options with each individual option with a recommended approach. And the idea is that collectively these options, if put into effect, would assist in the regulation of cannabis uses in the township. So the first option to discuss is fairly straightforward, and that would be right now the township zoning bylaw doesn't have a definition of cannabis or cannabis production, cannabis growing, or other types of terms. So with our review and background study, it was identified that it's a very common approach for most municipalities that do regulate cannabis to include these terms in their zoning bylaw. So we simply are recommending that the township zoning bylaw should be updated to include additional definitions related to cannabis. Similarly, another option to consider is updating the zoning bylaw to include specific standards and regulation for cannabis uses. As I mentioned with definitions, previously there with definitions, it's a common approach amongst municipalities to include standards in their zoning bylaw related to cannabis processing and production. And these standards would relate to minimum lot sizes, setbacks to sensitive land uses, lighting and odor control requirements, amongst other matters in their zoning bylaw. So our recommendation is that the zoning bylaw be updated to include standards and regulations relating to cannabis uses here in the township. In regards to site plan control, so the township's site plan control bylaw applies throughout the entire township, and all new development is subject to the site plan control bylaw, meaning that a site plan application and approval is required prior to a building permit. However, there are exemptions for single detached residential dwellings, agricultural uses, and some other items as well. Yeah, so in our review, we've identified that it's also a common approach amongst municipalities that regulate cannabis to apply site plan approval for cannabis facilities. So our recommendation is that the township zoning bylaw be updated as well to identify that site plan approval is required for new cannabis facilities and uses in the township. So we note there are, I've identified here 3 options for consideration on how the township could choose to regulate cannabis in the zoning bylaw. And I'll take you briefly through these, and then I have a recommended option. First of all, the township could define cannabis uses in the bylaw, however, not permit them in any zone in the township, which would effectively prohibit the use going forward. The second option to consider is that the zoning bylaw be updated to include provisions and standards for cannabis uses and set some overall guidance. However, a zoning bylaw amendment would be required to permit a cannabis use on a particular property going forward. So this would be, there'd be zoning provisions put in place. However, a zoning amendment would be needed on a site-specific basis for any new cannabis uses. And the third option would be to permit cannabis uses in particular zones or in a zone with provisions and standards. And this would be the most permissive approach. So our recommendation is for the township to consider option 2. And this would be the zoning bylaw would be amended to include general direction on where cannabis uses may locate or should locate. However, a zoning bylaw amendment would be required for each new application. And as part of the zoning amendment process, compatibility would be reviewed. Studies could be required, such as odor studies, lighting studies, etc. And the site-specific amendment would provide the opportunity for public input. Next, to talk about where cannabis uses should generally be directed in the township. The township can consider where cannabis uses should go. So that would be for cannabis production or growing uses and for the processing uses. So in the background report, we reviewed comments from MAFRA. We reviewed the County of Wellington official plan and best practices from other municipalities. So moving forward, our recommendations are that, and I'm talking at this point still in general terms, without the specific details being developed, and those will come in the next stage of our project. But we generally recommend that indoor cannabis production, that would be directed to the agricultural and industrial areas of the township. And that I have the caveat there that it's subject to compatibility being addressed. For outdoor cannabis production, we'd recommend that be directed to agricultural areas only. And that again is subject to compatibility being addressed. And finally, for cannabis processing, that this use would be mainly directed to an industrial area, but also could be directed to an agricultural area, considering provincial policy. So that could be as an agriculture related use or an on-farm diversified use. And our final recommendation here tonight is related to industrial hemp. So hemp is part of the cannabis plant, and it is a cannabis plant that does not have THC in the plant. And cannabis now is regulated under the Cannabis Act to medical and recreational cannabis. There is a different license called an industrial hemp license is required to grow hemp. So it's planning staff's understanding that hemp would be grown in a very similar fashion as medical or recreational cannabis, and that they would have some similar land use compatibility issues, mainly odor and lighting would be present with hemp as well as cannabis. And in our review, we've noted that some municipalities do regulate them in a similar fashion, and an example is Pelham. So our recommendation is going forward that industrial hemp and medical / recreational cannabis be regulated in a similar fashion by the township. So in terms of next steps, we'll be looking to take endorsed regulatory options and use these to develop a draft zoning bylaw amendment. And once we've prepared the draft zoning bylaw amendment, the next step would be to schedule a public meeting to present the draft zoning bylaw for public comment and input. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. You could just stop sharing your screen for a minute. That'd be great. Thanks, Curtis. Any questions or comments, either in regard to the recommendation or Curtis's presentation?
I'm good, thank you, Mayor.
I just have one question, Curtis, and that odor is often the first item that is raised around cannabis production, or the first one that I hear about in particular. What kind of tools do we have to, like, are we primarily looking to rely on, maybe I'm ahead of the process here, so if I am, just tell me, but what kind of tools would we look at to make sure that odor isn't or try to mitigate the potential for bad odor outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lennox. That's a good question. And I guess through my review, odor seems to be the most common issue raised with cannabis uses and land use compatibility. So there are some tools to try and regulate odor. I guess first off, the federal licensing process does set out and require that odor is supposed to be addressed by a license holder. And that could be odor control measures with filters and other techniques. And they have set up a way of contacting Health Canada to let them know if there are odor complaints. And I think it's something that's been evolving, and it seems that they've recently developed this new website to deal with odor issues for licensed users. So some of the tools maybe that the township has that we could utilize. The first one would be where cannabis uses are specifically located in relationship to sensitive land uses. So we could introduce in the zoning bylaw, we would introduce setbacks to adjacent residential uses and other sensitive uses such as schools or others. So setbacks is basically the main tool and the location of the use that can be regulated in the zoning bylaw. And then also as part of the process, studies can be required. So an odor control study can be required by the township, and that would be reviewed, and the applicant would have to indicate how they're addressing odor as well. And that would mainly be done through a zoning amendment process or as part of the site plan approval process. And I think the final thing to note is I understand that OMAFRA with University of Guelph is looking at odor and some other issues related to cannabis production. So I participated in their study at this point, just generally, but I guess we're all waiting to hear back from them. I'm not sure how quickly they'll have more information, but I believe they're looking at it as well. So as you're aware, we have MDS setbacks for agricultural livestock uses. So it would be ideal if there was a similar system set up for cannabis growing, and processing, but as of yet, the province hasn't released any more detail. The final thing to mention, sorry, my very long-winded answer to you here. There are some municipalities that have set up odor control bylaws. So as I understand, these bylaws have been set up to deal with noxious odors or nuisance odors. That some of them are not all toxic or noxious, but and that these bylaws have been set up to deal with cannabis. I've spoken to a couple of municipalities that have worked on implementing them. I understand a few of them are still haven't been fully implemented and have been appealed, and are still, I guess at this point, haven't been fully utilized. But a lot of them would involve testing and passive testing by the township with sniffer devices or similar things to try, have some controls or standards for odor. So this point, we haven't recommended that the township implement odor control bylaw. It's maybe something that the township could down the road if there was a need, but I think it's from what I could, for my research, it's still fairly early days for some of these odor control bylaws.
And I just a follow up one if I could, and then I'll come to you, Dan. So agricultural uses, because we're anticipating using this in an agricultural area. Some activities in agriculture are known to have odors attached to them, and there's a kind of a more friendly regulatory environment around agricultural operations because of that. Because if we're looking to require site-specific zoning, would that allow us to have more regulatory control around odor than normal farming practice?
Yes. So as part of the zoning bylaw amendment, the township would request an odor study that would indicate how odor is being addressed as part of the consideration of the site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. So with agricultural use, typically a zoning amendment isn't required. Now MDS for a new livestock or expanding livestock facility is applicable at the building permit stage, and that would be reviewed. But beyond providing information on the operation, an engineer's report isn't typically required for livestock use.
Okay, thank you. Dan, you had a question?
Curtis, I was just going to ask, and it's here, I know it's in the about security of these types of facilities. Is it something, is that not, we don't worry about that till we get to the site plan portion of it, or is security in these types of facilities, is it something that the municipality needs to really, should there be enhanced security at these types of facilities? Or where are we in that regard, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Yake. So the licensing process from the federal government for licensed facilities has security measures that have to be implemented. So they'll have to submit a security plan. As I understand, the operators and workers and owners will have security checks as well. The security implemented could include fencing, cameras, listening devices, locked doors for storage areas as well. So for the two examples we do have in the township, those would have, to get licensed, that would be reviewed by through the federal approvals process. So I think as part of our site plan application be typical for a lot of industrial type uses that we would have fencing requirements and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of it would come, we would look to the federal licensing process for the security requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor, I guess how would, if we got more or new applications for cannabis growers, how would, I guess, what is our ability to avoid what happened about a year, would it be a year ago, on Wells Street, just so we don't run into the same issues again? Or do we have anything under our jurisdiction aside from the OPP?
Yeah.
Darren? Oh, You're exactly Curtis?
Or do you want Darren to, can
Well,
add,
we can let you guys tag team it.
okay, I'll let Darren go first, sure.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox. So there's enforcement tools through the Planning Act that would allow us to enforce the zoning bylaw. If something were to pop up that we're against the zoning bylaw. And then if it was illegal, like not federally licensed, then OPP would become involved.
Okay. And would we, would anyone from the building department be able to go in and see if they're falling within whatever their operation was originally said to be? Like, you know, the last one we had, it was not as it seemed to be. Just wanted to kind of avoid that. Like, would we have, as a township, the right to go in and just quickly inspect it, or is that all federal jurisdiction?
I would think that it would be part of the federal license that would regulate the actual growing and that type of thing. But if they were doing something that that wasn't per the zoning, we would have the ability through the Planning Act or Building Code Act to investigate. Now, our process there would be mostly complaint driven.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I will call the motion on this first recommendation then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have a second recommendation, and it's as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North direct staff prepare draft zoning bylaw regulations for cannabis production and processing uses and schedule a public meeting in order to present the proposed zoning bylaw regulations to the public for review and comment. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, did anybody want to discuss this one any further? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to 5A. This is the transportation options for the Mount Forest Lions Roy Grant pool users. I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report RPL 2022-12, being a report on transportation options for the Mount Forest Lion Roy Grant pool users, and further the council direct staff to implement a passport tracking and season refund option for users, and further that council direct staff to implement a refund of $24 per visit to a seasonal maximum of $500 for users from the Township of Wellington North living north of Side Road 5 or Line 10, and further that council direct staff to fund these refunds using the 2022 approved operating accounts specific to the Lion Roy Grant pool. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Dan, seconded by Steve. Before we launch into discussion, I think Matt has an update for us on this as well. So I'll pass it over to you, Matt.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Lennox. And just with respect to the transportation report, I wanted to provide some additional information that staff only got today as it relates to Cook's bus line, and specifically the idea of having them supervise the day-to-day transportation. That would be an additional cost of about $200 per day. And the supervision that they would provide would basically count the number of people going down, count the number of people going back. But if there was a mismatch, the mismatch would be punted over to township staff to try to figure out You know, if someone didn't go to the pool and someone went to a friend's house instead. And also they wouldn't administer a permission form process, which would probably be in everyone's best interest. So for some of those reasons, and in discussions with Cook's Bus and you know, we're not recommending the school bus option as the preferred option. The recommendation that is before you is a rebate. And I'd suggest that staff struggled with selecting, with respect to the recommendation, you know, the north to south cutoff being side road 5 and line 10, as well as the amount being $24. The reason that's part of the recommendation is side road 5 and line 10 are the ward boundaries, and the $24 per round trip is based on a staff policy related to how much the township pays per kilometer of travel. Certainly both of those items are just, you know, they're items that staff have selected and put forward as a recommendation. Those were the reasons why. But if council thinks that those should be different, yeah, that's something that is completely within council's selection purview. And I think selecting a rebate option, you know, allows users to select the Ghost or the Ride Well. And it gives folks just different options for travel between Arthur and Mount Forest. But otherwise, hopefully the report speaks for itself, and certainly as staff, I'm available to answer any questions related to the report.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So I'll open the floor for discussion from members of council. Steve, go ahead.
Just with the ward boundaries, Matt, and maybe I'm not clear on this. That's the boundary of what we would be willing to rebate people for?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so the way it would work, Councillor McCabe, is that when people go to the pool in Arthur, they would have like a loyalty card or a like a stamp card. They could get it stamped, and the person, the lifeguard who would check them in, would just give everyone a stamp. At the end of the season, if you live, the way it's written right now is if you lived north of Side Road 5 within the Township of Wellington North, in September, if you were to submit your loyalty card with five stamps on, and you have an address north of Side Road 5, then you'd be eligible for a rebate of 5 times $24, so $120-ish, something like that.
Okay.
It's just to define an area of the township that is considered probably the Roy Grant pool catchment area, I guess.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted some clarification on that. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Sherry, go ahead.
So I'm actually kind of disappointed that we're not using the private transportation. It would be supporting local. It would be a more consistent budgetary item for the recreation department. And I would be hard pressed to think that we don't have somebody that could help out with supervision and permission slips. And also to help offset the costs. I wondered if there was any consideration given to asking the donors and the folks that provide public swimming here in Mount Forest to help subsidize the costs of the busing.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor Burke. There hasn't been those conversations that have happened again, or for sponsors of public swimming. The private busing option, if that's what council wishes staff to pursue, certainly staff will pursue it. It will just be very difficult. It will be very difficult from a staffing standpoint, or I guess in staff's opinion, we'll end up assuming unreasonable amount of risk related to just trying to track folks that are going back and forth. But certainly it, council, yeah, that's an option that's out there.
Sherry, go ahead.
If I may, I also think that it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask for a small fee, I don't know what public swimming actually costs, but we're asking people to put money out of pocket. So, if it costs an extra $1 or $2 for public swimming, for students to go either to swimming or swimming lessons, because I believe it's really important for our youth to learn how to swim. And it's also beneficial to us in operations in the future for the pool, so that we don't find ourselves in the predicament that we are in now, understanding that most other recreation facilities are as well, that we encourage and promote the youth to go through the system to become lifeguards.
Maybe I'm confused, Sherry, but can you just clarify your comments there? And particularly, were you suggesting that there be that the users of this be paid an administration fee? I'm just a little confused. So maybe
if you hop on the bus, I don't know, public swimming costs $3 a time. So if we asked the folks that are getting on the bus for $5, and that includes their swim, that helps offset the costs, and it's a lot cheaper than these other two options for students and families. And in the end, looks like it's a cheaper option by the time we recalculate rebates to do the private bus option. Because the price goes exponentially. And also, I'm sure that there are some folks that have already suggested that they want to provide public swimming or would provide public swimming to the Mount Forest pool. So could we not say, to those folks, hey, you've always provided public swimming in the past, maybe could we use that contribution that you were going to use this year to help offset the cost of the bus so that children could still go swimming?
Okay. I've got to think about that one, but I'll go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough issue to sort out. We're a few days from the 1st of July, and we're trying to sort out transportation costs and how are you going to get them there. The concern I have about a private contractor is what if children get sick or they get hurt, and who's gonna, if a child gets sick and needs to come home, how are we gonna arrange for that, to send one kid home or whatever the case may be. With this case, it's more than likely it's going to be a parent or a guardian or a sibling that's going to be with them, so they can deal with those types of issues. I think there's just a little too much risk with the private supplier, especially when we don't have an abundance of people to supervise. With our day camp programs, we have people that supervise. We pay people, we have qualified people that supervise these children. And in this case, we don't. So I guess because we're so late in the game here, I think the refund policy might be okay. I'm not opposed to asking the people that have sponsored public swimming in the past to maybe help out with some of the costs, but I just think we're a little late to the game.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I think as Councillor Yake has put it, we're kind of at the 11th hour here, and we're trying to put something together to do the best we can under the circumstances, and I think I'm prepared to support the refund policy at this point. But I think, you know, we're likely going to be dealing with this again next year, and perhaps we can have a little bit more time to think about how we go about this. If busing is really the preferred alternative for our users, then we have more time to get that organized and figure out some of these issues of risk that we certainly are facing. And it might be good to actually ask the users what might be the best option for them going forward. Now, we don't have time to do that now. We're trying to make the best of a difficult situation, but going forward, perhaps we can find out a little bit more about what best suits the needs of our users. Steve?
Yeah, excuse me, I have to agree with the, excuse me, with the refund. I think it's based strictly just on timing, if nothing else. You know, you don't want a young child down at the pool all day if they need to come back and the bus isn't there till 3:30 or anything like that. And I like the idea of a parent or a babysitter or guardian or sibling being there at the location as well if the child needs to get home, or anything else like that for that matter. So yeah, for now, I think the best of a bad situation, and I think I'm all right with refunding.
Okay. Does anybody have any strong feelings about the refund amount or the geographic cutoff?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, any final discussion before I call the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Sherry, go ahead.
So this looks like this is the motion that's going to be on the table. I'd just like to say that I'm going to support it only for the fact that I believe that the youth need some way to get down to the pool. But I do not believe it is the best option.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to 6A. This is the report with regard to the Compliance Audit Committee. We have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report CLK 2022-14 being a report to establish a Compliance Audit Committee. And further, the Council approves the terms of reference for the Compliance Audit Committee jointly with the Wellington County municipalities for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. And further, the council appoints the following members to the CAC: Jim McQueen, Wesley Schnarr, Doug Auld, and Joseph Servos. And further, the council authorizes the mayor and clerk to sign a bylaw authorizing the Compliance Audit Committee and terms of reference excuse me, for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. And further, the council authorizes the mayor and clerk to sign a bylaw appointing members to the CAC for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. Any discussion on that one? Steve?
Just a quick one, and maybe I missed this in the report, and I'm not sure who to ask. Who are these people?
They have been on our compliance audit for the last term as well. So they've been with us from 2018, and they submitted resumes. I mean, I can send you a copy of those confidentially, but we approved them. This council approved them in 2018. We have never had to use them. And that's the way we like it.
And that's why I didn't recognize their names. Okay,
Exactly,
thank
and
you
that's
very
a good
much.
Thing.
Great, thank
Any
you.
other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I guess that was the last one of the items, wasn't it, Karen? Okay. We're on to, is there any notice of motion this evening? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Dan, go ahead.
Just, I'd like to say thank you to everybody that, from the township, staff, council, and anybody else that was involved in helping support the foundation, hospital foundation gala. Turned out to be a wonderful evening. Nice to see so many people out and about, and I think they raised a substantial amount of money for the foundation. So just once again, thank you.
It feels good to go to those things, Councillor Gate, because we know that how important healthcare close to home is, and if this is what our community needs to do to help support that, it's certainly the right thing to do, and it's great to be there, be able to be there.
Yeah, for
sure. Steve, go ahead.
I wasn't at this event, but I did hear that on the 25th, this past Saturday, that there was a good turnout at the Optimis's unveiling, or I guess, yeah, unveiling of the renovation of their park there. I wanted to congratulate them and thank you, Dan, and staff that were there, as well as you, Mayor Lennox, to bring greetings. And again, it just goes back to the fantastic service clubs that we have in our township. They're most welcome and most needed as well. So I just wanted to thank all the optimists and everyone involved with that one as well.
Any other items people would like to report on today? Lisa?
Just kind of more of the same. I've had lots of meetings. The Arthur Chamber, well, the Arthur BIA was canceled due to tech issues, but there's stuff going on in the background. But it's all in Arthur. It's just all the committees are just all hands on deck for the Arthur BIA, or for the Arthur 150, right? So that's kind of all that's going on. And the Mount Forest Chamber, for a pretty similar thing. It was all things fireworks festival. So lots of good stuff happening, and people are excited, and everybody's working together. Good to see.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to report on this evening? Okay. Don't think I have anything either this time. So we'll move on to bylaws. We have a recommendation here that bylaw number 69-22, 70-22, 71-22, 72-22, 73-22, 74-22, and 76-22 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Dan, seconded by Steve. Any discussion on any of those bylaws? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Sorry, just a little technical difficulty.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, it just my iPad fell, that's all. Before we move to our closed meeting, or should I say I was just doing that to provide comic relief tonight. Before we move to our closed meeting, I'll just draw your attention to some meetings, notices, announcements, and so on. The Wellington North Farmers Market opened this past weekend and will run till September 24th on Saturday from 8:30 to noon. The Arthur 150th celebration, of course, we've talked about already, is coming up this weekend, Friday to Sunday. The next Rec Parks and Leisure Committee meeting is Tuesday, July 5th at 4 p.m. Our next regular council meeting is July 11th at 2 p.m. And of course, the Mount Forest Fireworks Festival is the 14th to the 17th of July coming up. With that said, we'll move to a closed meeting. And the recommendation is the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North go into a meeting at 9:10 p.m. That's closed to the public under subsection 239, subsection 2 of the Municipal Act 2000, specifically for item C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. D, labor relations or employee negotiations. And B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal and or local board employees. And we'll deal with reports, EDO 2022-24 regarding land sale, 2022-7 HR market check and policy review, and HR 2022-008 Chief Administrative Officer candidate review. And of course, review the closed meeting session meeting minutes from May 24th and June 6th. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. We are in closed. We'll just give